So my name is Raymond Jannas. I am CEO of ATEX Resources Inc. And accompanying me is Ben Pullinger, who is the Vice President of Exploration and Business Development, who joined us 3 months ago at 1st of June. And we're really happy to have Ben with us. His role here is really helping me out in advancing this great project that we have that is Valeriano in north central Chile in the high Andes, which is a it's a copper gold porphyry with tremendous intersections of about 1 kilometer in depth each hole. And we're really excited with our results. We just had our drilling results in early June. And to highlight, it was 1,162 meters at 0.78% copper equivalent, with included was 550 meters with 1.03% copper equivalent. We're really excited with the next phase program, which is going to be phase 3. That should be starting in October now.
Raymond, thank you very much for the introduction. Nice to meet you. Ben, nice to meet you again. We've met in a previous life. So ATEX Resources, market capitalization of $60 million. You've just raised $12 million. And you are about to head into the next phase of drilling and the next phase of work in Chile. Can we just, before we get into that, I don't know the project at all. I know that you're next to El Encierro. Could you just give me a little bit of background of where the deposit is, where the project is, and a little bit of its history, how you came to it? You've been working on it for 2 years. So background first, please.
I'll take that over a bit, Ben. I've been associated with the project for a long time. I knew about it when I was working at El Indio and doing all the exploration in the El Indio belt. That's when I first encountered it, and that was in the 80s. And that's when Phelps Dodge did a bit of drilling there, followed by Barrick. From then on, the project went on hold, and I picked it up when I was Vice President of Exploration and Mine Geology at Hochschild Mining. And I picked it up because we were looking for 2 things in our exploration. One was a company maintainer, which meant some new mine project about the size of what the mines were being developed by Hochschild. And on the other hand, we had another focus, which was a company maker, which would be something big enough that would be at least the cash flow of the whole company. And I saw in Valeriano a small gold epithermal system on top that could be a maintainer, but there was a potential of a porphyry in depth. And that's why I picked it up for Hochschild. I left Hochschild shortly after I picked that up, and the first discovery holes were done by them. Then it was picked up by ATEX Resources. They finished that work about 2015. It was picked up by ATEX Resources late 2019.
And before you get into the ATEX, why did Hochschild not continue with it? Was that just the stage of the market? Because I think late 2015 was actually the very, very bottom of the market. You know, that's when the lowest copper price was.
Exactly. It's exactly that.
But the mood was changing already. I mean, that was the start of the kind of the battery metals. I know, or maybe, you know, cobalt was certainly running in 2017, 16, 17.
I can't answer the question because I was not in Hochschild at that time exactly. But from what I understand, as their focus has always been gold, silver, and, you know, prices were on the lower end, and they had payments coming along, and a big investment necessary to keep on this project. And I think it wasn't the right moment for them.
Okay.
So they stayed so they stayed with 10% of the project when they took off. So it's owned 90% by 2 Chilean geologists and 10% by Hochschild. And this was picked up in 2019 by ATEX, especially by Albert Schneider, and put into ATEX. And they invited me as CEO in July 2020, which was right at the pandemic time. And that's when we took off with the project.
Thank you. No, but did Albert Schneider, did he know that you knew the project? I mean, had your name come up as kind of one of the geologists associated with it?
We're very good friends with Albert for many years, so we've always talked about his projects and my projects. So we've been involved from conversations for 20, 25 years. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Ben, what was your route into the company? What were you looking for? Where do you got to in your career? And because you're the QP for the project, you sign off on it on the news releases, don't you?
I do going forward, yeah. And I mean, from my perspective, at the end of last year, I joined Golden Star Resources and had a brief stint over there. And Craig Nelson, the chairman of ATEX, was actually largely responsible for that move. Once Golden Star had been acquired earlier this year, I took a little bit of a break, and he encouraged me and introduced me to Raymond. Encouraged me to go down to Chile and have a look at the project. I got there while the well hole 17 was being drilled, saw the core, saw the team, saw the people around it, saw the potential, and really wanted to be a part of it because I think it could be something quite special.
Okay, really interesting. And Craig Nelson, he was with Goldfields Exploration for many years, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
And I worked with Craig for many years together. We worked during our lifetime here in the Alindio Belt. We worked together at Goldfields when I was in charge of exploration for Latin America. So I have a long time acquaintance with him. And I worked with Craig during Metallica time when he formed Metallica Resources, and where he ran the company, but Pierre had chosen him to run it, Pierre Lassonde. And that's where we come with our friendship with Pierre, who is right now our principal shareholder.
Oh, okay. So what's his percentage in the company?
I think it's 11.1% right now.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Interesting.
I don't have exact. Mm-hmm.
So it's as so often in these things, it's relationships. It's going right back. I mean, it's interesting that you were exploring this in the 1980s. Again, just going back, I know we will look forward, but Phelps Dodge obviously looking for copper in those days. Barrick in those days looking for gold. What were the results in the test work that was kind of the exploration that was done there that didn't encourage them to carry on, or what did you see that made you want to keep going?
Well, I'll take you back in time. This is, in the mid 70s is when Chile started opening up and mining companies started coming in, and the El Indio mine was discovered, the high-grade El Indio mine, and Escondida was found shortly after that. Phelps Dodge came in and was interested both in finding a high-grade copper or gold system. So they chose this, but their drilling didn't show what they wanted, which was both. There was some gold, but it wasn't high-grade, so they pulled out. Barrick started understanding the El Indio Belt during the 80s and was looking at all alternative targets and looked at this one and wanted to see how large the gold epithermal system was. And it is not too large. It's probably remnants of a larger system that was eroded. So they pulled out. So it's the gold epithermal system is not large at all. What called our attention was the size of the alteration system. And every time you have kilometers in size of alteration and you have some mineralization, you got to work a bit more on it. That was what happened with our discovery of Pascua, with a similar thing during my time at Barrick. All really, I like minerals.
Yeah, it is, as you say, you've got to look for that major hydrothermal system, that mineralizing system that can bring the metal, and then within that large footprint, you've got to be able to vector into the core of the system, or at least to the high-grade parts of the system. Which kind of brings us to where it is today. What is your current understanding of Valeriano?
We're really excited, but I'll let Ben tell his story, why he got excited and joined us.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that I think really set this project on a good track. The size. We now have it defined within a geological footprint of 800 by 850 meters. And we've got it drilled down to 2 kilometers, where hole 17 finished at 2,057 meters and was still in mineralization. So as Raymond mentioned earlier, the holes drilled by Hochschild were all close to 1 kilometer of consistent mineralization down hole. And one of the things that's actually really good about this project, especially if you imagine a future production scenario, is the top 650 meters of all of the holes that are on that section. Hole 14, which was drilled by Hochschild, hole 19 drilled by ATEX, and hole 17 drilled by ATEX are all in the realm of 0.65 to 0.63% copper equivalent. Very consistent grade, very smooth. And even once you get into the high grade portion between hole 14, which was the 272 meters at 1% copper equivalent, and hole 17, the 550 meters at 1.03, these are not spiky grades. These are consistently anomalous, with excellent distribution of metals within the system. The dissemination of the chalcopyrite and the lesser bornite is, you see it, it's fine grained. So it just looks like a smooth, consistent system with a big footprint still to go. The geophysical anomaly over the top of this 800 by 850 meter area that we now have drilled off is 3 kilometers in diameter. So, we believe that there's a lot of room to still expand this and a lot more work to be done with the drill bit in understanding and defining some of those higher grade sections and potentially finding some more.
Okay, so what you've been talking about, what you've been describing so far is very much the copper porphyry system. Does that mean that the approach to define the kind of gold resources, either the oxide gold at the top or the kind of the epithermal systems, is now very much kind of a sidecar or a backseat to the porphyry exploration? Is this a pure copper porphyry plus exploration story?
I'd say yes, and I wanted to complement to what Ben had said. What's really interesting is that the 4 drill holes that have cut significant amount of mineralization in the copper gold porphyry have more than 1 kilometer length of continuous mineralization, like Ben was saying. There's a couple of holes done by Hochschild that hit the porphyry initially, but were lost by different reasons, just like we lost our hole 19 for drilling problems. And there's a lot of evidence that each one of these holes could extend for another kilometer. So we know, like Ben was saying, that we have 1 kilometer at least vertical, and we have 800 by 850 meters up to now, and we have an anomaly 3 kilometers. So the size potential of this is tremendous, and we're really excited of the next drill program going in that direction.
Ben, could you pull up some maps? I think it'd be useful just to see kind of where it is in Chile.
Sure.
And also, I mentioned at the start that it's next to El Encierro.
Correct.
How far ahead is that? And I know that you can't measure perhaps sometimes the way that the majors work in terms of, a few years of the work that the majors do is different to the work that a junior do, because juniors typically move much more faster. But, where is it in its kind of understanding relative to you? Oh, but hang on. So sorry, let's come to that question in a bit. Let's park it for now. Let's just look where you are in the district.
Yeah, so we're down here on the bottom edge of what we call the link belt that links the El Indio to the Maricunga belt. And there's actually, a lot of our peers and the companies, the bigger brothers that we look up to in the market at the moment are in this part of the world as well. You've got Filo, NGEX, and another deposit that Raymond and Craig are quite familiar with that used to be called El Moro. Now La Fortuna, part of the Tech Newmont Nuevo Union joint venture, sitting over here. And as you mentioned, Merlin, we're sitting down here on the southern end with the El Encierro project, our immediate neighbor to the north of us.
Sorry, I meant to, you've got another slide. Sorry.
No worries.
You've got the project slides, which kind of takes a closer look.
So here, this slide is very good for, I think, what you're trying to understand here. North is in this direction. This is the Argentine-Chilean border. Argentina on this side, Chile over here. This is in pink is the Valeriano property outline. We have another piece sitting over here. And this piece in blue over here is the El Encierro joint venture outline. Here you can see a projection of the mineralization at El Encierro to surface and Valeriano over here. So as you mentioned, the El Encierro has been around for a long time. There's been exploration at El Encierro dating back, Raymond, 10, 15, 20 years more?
It has the same history a bit, but let's say on the porphyry end, there was a bit of discovery done by Barrick initially, some copper evidence, but when it really was drilled out when Antofagasta picked it up about 5 years ago.
Yeah, and on the same day that we put out our drill results, they very fortuitously put out their maiden resource on the project as well, which you see there is the 522 million tons at 0.79% copper equivalent, But what's really interesting about it as well is the scale of the halo mineralization around that. It sits within an inventory, a global inventory of 2.5 billion tons at 0.56% copper equivalent.
And are these identical rocks? Have you looked at their core? Is it the same age mineralization?
It's pretty much the same system. The tops of the mineralization start at the same elevation. Continuous alteration for the most part. They're 6 kilometers apart from each other. And then the one thing there, in terms of the timing and the relative time that you're asking about, Merlin, on the project, is Encierro now has close to 50,000 meters of drilling, whereas we're, especially in the Porphyry mineralization, we're sitting at less than 8,000 meters and just getting started.
Okay, that's a really useful metric, isn't it? Just to show that they've drilled out 50,000 meters. And the beautiful thing about these porphyries is that if they are consistent internally, you can put together a huge resource. I mean, look at that, 50,000 meters for 2.5 more or less billion tons of rock. Yeah. Imagine if you're trying to drill out a structural gold project, 50,000 meters would just be getting you started.
Yeah, I have asked myself a couple of times here why I've been chasing veins my whole life when things like this exist.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you want to add, go on.
Answering one of your questions, the only core we've seen from El Encierro is the one that was at PDAC this year when they brought out the results. We had not seen any other core prior to that.
And was it like looking at some of your own core?
There's similarities. There's a bit of differences. They have a lot of mineralization in breccias, and we don't have so much in breccias. We have most of our mineralization in the porphyry, in the intrusive porphyry per se.
Interesting. That was a glib assumption of mine that they would be the similar geology.
Yes. The generality is very similar. So when you look at the bulk of the 2.5 billion tons, yes, there's a lot of mineralization in that rock that's very similar to ours. However, their higher grade is in breccia, and our higher grade is in the porphyry.
Okay. Ben, could you go on? You've got some sections as well of the holes you've drilled, or the holes that have been drilled.
Yeah, I mean, so I think this is a great place just to introduce the geology a little bit, because there are a couple of really neat aspects about the geology. So these are the 3 holes that we talked about that were drilled by Hochschild that have, pretty much a kilometer of continuous mineralization. And this is where the project was left. The geology that you see there was actually done by one of the El Encierro geologists, or a person that's done a lot of work up at El Encierro logging core. And he put this initial interpretation of what we were seeing from a porphyry mineralization in place into these rhyolites together. The key thing here is, this is hole 14, are these red older porphyry units here. This one we know exists, and this is where we have the 272 meters at 1% copper equivalent, and we're able to step out and hit this again in hole 17. And these ones we suspect might be there from we've got a few indications between mag and some of the stuff that we've seen in hole 16. We want to follow up and see if this is here as well. So, this really tells that story. And one of the other things I think that's really important to point out here as well is, because these porphyries have intruded rhyolites, the rocks here are high silica, low iron, not very reactive. And so you get a very clean, tightly constrained system that we believe, with the metallurgical test work that we're doing right now and should have done by the end of this year, we can show something where we could see high recoveries and high concentrate salability on the back of that initial work, which I think is something everyone wants to know very quickly. If there's any deleterious elements, or if there's anything nasty in the network. And I think we'll be able to prove that this is going to be very clean.
Thank you. That's a really useful summary. But just looking at the sketch that's there, obviously there's this kind of complex interplay of these phases of the porphyries. You said that the early porphyry is the most is the highest grade one. It looks to me as if kind of volumetrically the intermineral porphyries VP2 and VP3 are kind of perhaps the dominant by volume. Is that what you interpreting at this stage?
I mean, I think on this section you could make that conclusion. But if you step over into hole 17, for example, this is, as I said, 272 meters. Whereas you step over into hole 17, you hit this BP1 unit over here, it's 550 meters. I think we're estimating it at close to 200 meters true thickness. So I think there's going to be a lot of things still to define and discover as we drill it out. And I think it's a bit early to make those assumptions yet.
Okay, good. And I can see that on hole 9, I think it is, you've got that section of 848 meters at 0.64, and yet that seems to be going into the wall rock.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the wall rock is quite well mineralized there.
Just as a general concept on this figure, the brown on top are Miocene volcanics. The rest below are rhyolite basement rocks of Permo-Triassic intruded by Miocene intrusives. And the mineralization is about 10 million years old. And there's a multiple intrusives. It's been not easy to distinguish them. And when these rocks intrude, they brecciate the host rock, the rhyolite host rock. And as a brecciated rhyolite looks exactly the same as a rhyolite, it's very hard to distinguish. Fortunately, we've been able to discover, to relate this, and we see that most of the mineralization within the wall rock is in the brecciated zone more than on the rhyolite per se. So yes, we have in drill hole 9 tremendous amount of mineralization all in wall rock.
Interesting, really interesting, which shows you that there's a big hydrothermal system which is kind of brought in with the porphyry intrusions themselves. So it's not just the magmas that are coming in, but there's a kind of a hydrothermal cell or a circulating system associated with that. There's
a high sulfidation epithermal system that's about 250 meters thick, sitting on top of the porphyry mineralization as well.
And I know that you're in the very early stages of drilling. You've got whatever it is, 19 holes into the system. But when I look at that, I think this is kind of, with that consistent mineralization, in my mind, I already think, oh, this is probably going to be a block cave target rather than an open pit.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're trying to show, that there is an underground potential high grade in the zone. And Ben will go through that on this slide.
Okay. So go on, talk me through this one. What do you want to highlight on this?
Yeah, so this is the section looking back at these drill holes. And the first thing is that, from the top of ATX-V-17 here down to the bottom is over 2 kilometers, just to get a bit of scale on that. This is the high sulfidation event that we were talking about. And, in terms of consistency of mineralization, which, you alluded to as well, these 3 holes, the top of the 650 meters of all these holes are pretty much that 0.65 to 0.63% copper equivalent. Then you get down into ATX, into 17 here, where you've got the high grade mineralization. And again, very smooth grade distribution through there. It's not, it's not spiky. It's not one assay wonders. It's very consistently mineralized all the way through. So, as Raymond said, if this were to be an underground operation in the future, we want to get as much of that high grade constrained as possible. And you'll be able to use that as the way to bring forward payback, reduce the IRR, and really make this project into something special that can be accessed from underground and stand alone as a developable project.
And can you take me back to, I can't remember whether you passed it or not, but can you show me the geophysical signatures as well?
Absolutely.
One thing that's really interesting before we go into geophysical is that we have 2 valleys on each side of the porphyry, and you can access from those valleys about 350 meters deeper than you are at surface. So that's a geographical situation that's really, really interesting. So that
so you can put an adit in at that level.
Each side,
from each side. Draw points from each side, access from.
Exactly that.
But you will need to go deeper than that, won't you? If your mineralization starts at whatever it is.
Absolutely. But you have good access, and you got really a lot of space to go down into those depths from many alternatives.
Right, geophysics. Tell me about this.
So on the geophysics, on the left we have an IP survey that was done by Hopchild, which really images that the interface of the porphyry between 600 and 800 meters very well in this section that you see, or the section view that you see over here. Below, this is the plan view of the the donut-shaped anomaly. This is the 3 kilometer big anomaly, and the project sits, the 800 by 850 sits there tidally down in here. In order to see a bit deeper, because we were looking for porphyry mineralization here, and we wanted to see how, like, what the extent of the system might be, ATEX undertook an MT survey, which you see here on the right. So same kind of view, just with the one on the right seeing down to in excess of 2 kilometers, but imaging pretty much the same thing. You can see the high resistivity here of the interface between the porphyry and the host rock. And once you get down through that, you see this continuous porphyry mineralization heading all the way down, open in both directions, and at this point untested below 2 kilometers. The surface, the plan view, again, exactly the same shape and size of anomaly, sitting on top of where we think that porphyry mineralization is, and that's 3 kilometers. So having only tested less than a kilometer of this at this point, I think there's a lot of room for us to grow. It's open in all directions, and it's going to be a tale of the drill bit.
Sorry, just going back to the IP image in the top left, that green kind of cap over the top, that's a resistivity.
It's a resistivity, yeah.
So that is reflecting what, the rhyolite or silicification?
It's really less than 200 ohm meters, and the green there represents the same as the green on the slide to the right, okay? And the red is even lower resistivity. And it's probably representing here the high sulfidation mineralization characterized by covellite replacing pyrite up above. And it didn't reach down into the porphyry system, and as you can see, the drill holes have tremendous intersects without having the geophysical anomaly, which we did complement with the magnetotellurics. That you see the same green there, and relating to our deeper holes.
Forgive me for asking stupid questions, but normally when I look at an IP survey, what I often see is the kind of the pyrite rings around a porphyry, the classic alteration, concentric alteration phases around a porphyry often highlight, or often kind of jump up like they light up like a Christmas tree in a porphyry. But I'm not seeing that in your IP. Maybe I'm just looking at the wrong things.
No, I think you're in the right direction. But the big difference is that most of the porphyries that you looked at are probably hosted in andesites, which have a lot of iron, which can form a lot of pyrite with a hydrothermal system. And you're here intruding a rhyolite with very low iron content, and you probably cannot form that amazing pyrite halo. And that's what we like about this. And that's what Ben was telling you. And the mineralization in the porphyry is chalcopyrite greater than pyrite. So we really, it's a uniqueness. And we think that is what's driving it here. That's our conclusion from what we've seen, because we do not get that big pyrite halo.
Okay, so thank you. That's a clarifying explanation. So do you use the difference between the, in terms of your kind of vectoring with the geophysics, what are the vectors? I mean, you might have already mentioned it, but is it that resistivity low and then underneath going to resistivity high? Is that your key vector here on the magnetotellurics?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then also, sorry, Merlin, just to add to that, and also having now 5 drill holes below that, and you haven't hit some pretty high grade and getting a better handle on the orientation of things, it really aids to, as you layer everything on, it gives us a better perspective and picture of where we want to go next.
And from here, can you take me in your presentation to a kind of a plan view of your area and where the zones that you're going to be targeting for drilling? Here we go.
There we go. So this is the section that you saw earlier on the Hochschild drilling. So 16, 14, and 9 over here. These are the holes that ATEX drilled this year. 19, which unfortunately was, as Raymond said earlier, was dropped and it was terminated due to drill error. And 17 over here, which is the 2 kilometer long hole with the pretty spectacular results. So we think this section here represents that VP1 that we talked about earlier, that older porphyry, the higher grade. And we want to be able to go back, follow up on this, define it, vertically, horizontally, extend it along strike, and start to get a feel for what the size of this higher grade mineralization could be. At the same time, we want to be able to push this envelope that is now defined at 800 by 850 meters, and also follow up on some of these secondary anomalies, which I'll flip to another slide to show you.
Well, hang on, before don't leave just yet.
Okay, go back there.
No, but sorry, just going to say that envelope, the current limit of the porphyry system, is that a projection from depth that you've pulled up, or is that something that you can map on surface?
It's pretty much based on the intersections in the drill holes projected to surface. Okay,
and just in terms of your immediate work plan for now until either the end of the year or the next 6 months, you choose kind of what time frame you're going to tell me about. But where, apart from drilling the VP1, that corridor, where else are you going to be drilling?
We've got 2 slides to talk about that. All right. So the first is this, which is a mag survey with our drilling overlaying over the top of it. So these are these features coming through here that we believe might correlate with those higher grade older porphyries. And there's a second one coming through here. So this is something we want to test, because if that's real, and we have 2 of these corridors that we can now extend and put together, and they're of the high grade that we saw in 17, and that's a really significant step forward for the project. In addition to that as well, what we've done is we've gone with the ability to drill directional drilling, and awarded a contract to a crew that can do this and are very experienced at this. And this allows us, not only to be a lot more efficient and a lot more effective with the drilling, but test multiple targets of each drill setup as we move through the porphyry. So we can do expansion, exploration, and test new targets from very few setups, but all at the same time, pretty much. And one other thing about this is, in the event that we're successful with any of these daughters, or we like what we're seeing, we can change the plan, change the drill setup, and move in a direction pretty much on the fly to be efficient and almost react in real time while we're drilling.
This is something really important that Ben is showing. One of our highest risk in our exploration in the high Andes is when you have to do deep holes, you lose some of those holes. And as you saw, out of the 3 that we drilled last year, we lost 2, one quite deep, but the other one quite shallow. So that's a problem. And if you look at hot shells drilling, same thing happened to them. They would come into the mineralization of the porphyry, and just due to drilling issues, they couldn't continue. So there's a lot of holes that just touched the porphyry, but didn't go through it. And we know that now, that with this directional drilling and the capability of geodrill or recon drilling, we will have that capability, and we're assuring and de-risking the project. And as he mentioned, Ben mentioned, we're after the high-grade corridor that we already know, because that could show that there is a potential for a size of a block caving that already. We're looking for other high zones, and we're trying to understand the completeness and size of our project. But still in early stage, we're not going to come out with a new resource with this drilling.
I understand the mother holes and the daughter holes, and the using that mag anomaly. There was that the grid squares on that mag image were about 5 kilometers apart, and it looked as if that second trend was quite some distance apart, and that's still on your license area, is it?
That second trend is actually under hole 16. So it's about 400 meters away from the other one.
Oh, it's 500, not they were 500 meter squares, not 5 kilometers. Okay. What have you got in terms of your drill budget? How many meters are you planning to do in this next phase of work?
So we're starting a 10,000 meter program in October, and then we'll see how that goes. Success dependent, we can roll that into another 10,000 meters. And it will just come down to, what we're seeing in the rocks. We've pretty much secured the financing for the most part for being able to do this. But if we're putting out results, see what we want to see, we'd like to keep the program going. And that's why we set it up with this staged approach the initial 10,000, and then the option to roll into a follow-up 10,000, as the geology dictates.
And will that be with one rig or two rigs?
Two drill rigs.
They are all going to be 1.5 kilometer holes. I mean, obviously the daughter holes are going to be shorter once you've got the mother down, but so is one rig going to do single holes of 1.5 to 2 kilometers, and the other rig going to do the mother hole and then the directional drilling?
No, so the beauty about the system and the way that these holes will be drilled is you can literally start and come off on the first hole, on the first daughter, go back, then drop down to the second daughter, and you don't have to go all the way down to the bottom. So you can systematically work through your shallower targets, and if you like what you see at shallow, you can follow it down. And you can make these decisions pretty much live because the mineralization is so visible, and with the capability of these rigs, we can plan everything on the fly.
And are both rigs capable of doing directional drilling?
Correct. So one rig will be starting on new setups, and then we'll have another that will be testing and trying to leverage the existing infrastructure with the old holes and following up on targets coming out of old holes and using what we already have drilled. So we're trying to be as efficient and effective as possible with this drill program. So
summarizing that, one rig will look to kind of test the kind of slightly lower risk extensions of known mineralization in existing holes, and the other rig is going to test things like that new corridor with the mag, or kind of slightly more expansionist exploration.
Close enough, yeah.
Close enough.
But not necessarily in the sense that, you can really bring in a daughter hole, and if you bring it out from 800 meters, you can put it another 1,200 meters. So you can test quite a bit of a distance into new areas out of a daughter hole too. So our focus is, our first holes are for the high grade zone, but we'll put daughter holes into exploration into new zones.
Good. And so if you start drilling in October, these are big holes and quite slow. News results by the end of the year, or is that too early? Q1 next year, safer?
I would like to be able to put out a Christmas present to the market. There's always a bunch of logistical things, assay turnaround and stuff like that make that difficult to predict. But if we can get something out by the end of the year, we'd be very happy, and that would be the schedule we're aiming for. But early next year at the worst, I'd say.
Yeah. Got it.
But we will have some metallurgy results before the end of the year, because we have 2 med samples out for doing the med study.
Okay, good. And the other, you spoke about one risk being the loss of a hole. The other obvious risk is Chile, its approach to environmental permitting and drilling. I mean, quite separate to the Constitution, which I think is going to get kicked back in a week or so. So moving aside from the mining code, it's just kind of the risk associated with environmental permits, particularly in the high Andes. I think I would be remiss of me not to ask you that question. So here it is. What's your take on that?
I'll leave that one for Raymond.
Well, I think that's an important question. I think it's a fundamental question through what Chile is going through now. And as you say, we have the constitutional referendum coming up this Sunday, and we'll see what the outcome is. We have, new taxes coming into mining that are still being discussed in the Senate. But the environmental side is really important. And fortunately, where we are, there's no type of ice or any issues with respect to glaciers, okay? But we have to be very aware that we have to do things correctly and be very transparent so we can advance both socially and environmentally with the program. And we're working strong on that area, and we're trying to keep a very good relationship with communities, as well as doing everything in the right place. But, there's been some hiccups or problems that Anglo and Phoenix Gold have had during this time. And I think it's just a position, a momentary position of the new government. And I think what the new government will have to see and change is that they need investment, and let's see what comes out of the referendum. So I think it's the right way to answer this question is let's wait a week and let's start talking this again.
Okay.
What happened on Sunday? Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for giving me such a thorough introduction to the project. I look forward to seeing your progress and watching the news flow. And thank you very much for taking the time to tell me about it. I've really enjoyed learning about it.
Thank you.
Pleased to meet you, Merlin, and talk to you soon. And hopefully after we start drilling.
Good. I look forward to it.
And good luck with your projects too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Good luck with Salazar. Nice meeting you. Ciao, ciao.